Yes, we are live. I'm here with my good friend, my old friend, Christian Münzner.
Münzner, exactly.
Münzner.
Münzner, yeah.
Münzner. It's,
Yeah. And that was good. That was really good.
it's too difficult for me.
Oh, that was really good.
Yes, we are live. I'm here with my. All right, I have visual confirmation that it's happening on YouTube. All right, so this is the 10th episode of the Scarguitar show. And I'm very pleased to have you on, Christian. You have been one of the top of the list of people I wanted to get on the show.
That's very nice. And it's good to see you again after so many years.
Yeah. Do you even have an idea of how long it may have been?
Yeah. The last time I was at your place when we did the Fire Within album was 10 years ago, 2015. And I think we met one time after that. And that was when you toured with Scarguitar with supporting Epica. And I think I met you in Nuremberg
Yeah.
at that show. I think that was the last time that we actually met. That must have been,
That
I
was
don't know, late
also
2015.
yeah, it was also 15.
Yeah. That was also 15. That was the last time I saw you, actually.
Yeah. And we haven't really kept in touch a lot.
Not really, no.
Yeah. Life
I know you've been
life
doing
happened.
the Meshuggah tour. Yeah, yeah. Life got in the way, right, for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know if I told you. I've told my Patreon people, but when I started Patreon and I tried to figure out what kind of things to offer my members, what kind of content, what I would think could be cool for them, but also what could be cool for me. Because if what I'm doing sucks for me, it's not going to be very long lasting. So
Right.
I had this idea that if I do a live stream show like this, and I invite my friends in the business, like since I know a lot of guitarists in the like, I think that would be cool for people to get to sit in on a private chat, and
Right.
send in questions and interact. I thought that could be cool for them, and for me, it would provide an opportunity to reach out to people that I, for whatever reason, don't talk to, outside of when we meet at NAMM or shows or
Right.
festivals and so on. And you're for sure one of those people, like a really good friend of mine, I would say, even if we haven't
Yeah.
really talked in a long time. So yeah, so
Right.
I'm super excited about reconnecting, and to people watching. Chris and I, we have only been like texting here for a few weeks, talking about this and some other stuff, but we haven't really talked all that much about life and
No.
what's
No.
been going on. So I think like you have to fill me in on a whole shitload of things.
Yeah. I don't even know where to start. So much happened in my life since I saw you the last time. So
You grew a
I mean,
beard.
career-wise, I grew a beard, yeah, but I need to cut it again. Actually, I want to cut it before the show, but I go to the barber here all the time, but yeah, just ran out of time, so I look a little bit wasted. So yeah, I mean, since the last time, yeah, I mean, I've been, I know you did the Meshuggah thing, right, for a pretty long time.
Yeah.
So you were basically touring all the time. Um, I, I did a couple more records with Eternity's End after the one that we did together. I did another solo record. I did two more records with Alkaloid. Rejoined Obscura in the meantime. Left again, but I did a pretty big tour with them after the last record. I got married, moved to Mexico, so big change in my life actually that happened. So yeah. So this is like in a nutshell, like the outlines of what happened.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah,
So yes, you got married.
yeah. Like last year in April. Yeah,
Nice. Congratulations.
yeah, yeah. Thank you, thank you.
So your wife is Mexican?
Yes, yes. And we were like contemplating for a while, where are we going? But because her father died in the COVID, and she inherited a company that she has to run, so she's kind of bound to be here locally. And for me, it's a little bit more easy because I work remote. I work on Skype and things like that. So for
Mm.
me, it's I can work from wherever. And I actually enjoy being in Mexico. The people are really friendly here. The weather is always good. The living costs are not too high, so it's very manageable as a musician.
Yeah.
And so I really like my life how it is now. I've never been one to be afraid of change, and so I'm very happy with my yeah, with where my life is at right now. So that's pretty good.
Yeah. Did you ever, like before you met your wife, did you ever
Mm.
like fantasize or about living somewhere as distant as Mexico?
Probably not as distant, but I was thinking about maybe going to another place where people are a little bit more friendly and where the weather is nice and things are a little bit easier, It was always been kind of contemplating that, never really had a reason to do so, but it wasn't too hard for me, to do that step. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things I still miss from Germany, but yeah, for the most part, I'm
Yeah.
pretty
And
happy.
and what's that? The Bockwurst?
And the bratwurst, no. Actually, the food is much better
Bratwurst.
in Mexico. Bratwurst is good. I kind of miss that, but
Mm.
they have some places here where they do like their own version of the bratwurst. But the kind of thing that I miss a little bit the nature, because where I live in Germany, I live in the mountains and I can just go with my mountain bike and there's forests and mountains. And here I live in the big city, and it's not so easy to go to places like that are a little
Mm.
bit more quiet. This is the main thing that I miss. My parents, I see them from time to time. I go to Germany like 2 times a year, and in 2 months they are visiting Mexico, so that's going to be nice. But apart from that, I feel very content here. Like I have everything I need. Yeah.
All right. I, sorry. I actually recall you talking about like your thoughts about living in Germany and being a musician in
Mhm.
Germany uh,
Yeah.
and I think like I can't re paraphrase everything you said, but
Yeah.
do you remember this?
Yeah. Like in Germany, it's like if you're a musician or like a full-time musician, it's a little not everyone, but it feels a little bit like people look down on you a little bit.
Yeah.
So I remember when I was teaching full-time at a music school, and I'm talking to the parents of the children, and then they ask me what I do for a living, what my job is. And I'm like, I mean, I'm teaching a kid to play guitar. And
Yeah,
I'm like, yeah,
and you
but
were
what do you do for a
teaching.
living?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a little bit different here in Mexico. It's more like, when they go, oh, you're a musician, you made a career out of this, and they show me, or they show a lot of respect for that. Whereas in Germany, it's more like you're being looked down upon a little bit,
Hmm.
for that, where people here actually really, really appreciate it. And I think this is a very nice change, you know? Yeah.
All
Okay,
right.
here get some construction work happening in the house. I hope that's not interfering too much with the chat. Someone is using like a drill or something.
All right. I
Uh,
can't hear it
yeah.
at all. I think
Okay,
maybe
good.
you have the
Good.
noise canceling thing that cuts out anything that's not your
Okay.
voice.
Okay, that's
Um,
good. Yeah.
and I mean, you're sitting there with your guitar, but I know it's not
Right.
plugged in. So if it
Yeah.
was, I would have asked you to change some settings.
Hmm.
In this, we're doing this on as a Zoom call.
Right.
So yeah, there are some settings if that makes things not cut out.
Hmm.
So, but I'm feeling I'm just seeing the upper horn on your guitar there. So you're kind of teasing it for us.
Yeah.
Can you lift it up a little bit?
Yeah, this is my new signature, and it's actually exists. I got it now since almost 2 years, but this is my signature guitar. It's a German brand called Siggy Brown Guitars, and they had this custom made for me, and I kind of wanted to have an instrument that has all the requirements for like the modern day kind of metal, 7 strings down tuned and things like that, but still has all the aesthetics of the guitars of the 80s that I liked, like the design is a little bit. I wanted to have to look a little bit like the BC Rich the Tony McAlpine has in the Maximum Security
Yeah.
album. It kind of looks a little bit like that, and it's scalloped from the 12th fret on,
Hmm.
but the lower 12 frets are not scalloped because for rhythm playing I don't really like it.
Yeah.
But and it got 27 frets actually on the high E string because very often, I think I told you this, I record solos sometimes in standard tuning, but my band's usually tuned down to D, and then I often use the 24th fret, and then I have to do it live. I'm like, okay, how am I going to do that now?
Yeah.
So I got that. That's really cool. And they have like a single coil in the neck position, which is angled, and it didn't really exist for seven strings. So a German company named Heisenberger, they custom made this pickup.
Hmm.
So it has a little bit of the aesthetics of an 80s shred guitar, but still it's a seven string and still has like all the like modern, requirements. You have like a Seymour Duncan Nusskul in the bridge
Hmm.
and a Schaller tremolo with two springs in the back. So yeah, really, really happy with this guitar. It's quite an upgrade to what I played before.
Nice. So what's the scale length?
It's a standard because normally the manufacturer said it's advised to do the longer one for the down tuning. But because of my dystonia with the hand problem, when the distances get too wide, I get problems in the lower regions, and that's why I opted against it. Even though he advised, of course, would be beneficial, because it's tuned down to A.
Yeah.
So the longer scale would be better. This is, as well as the standard, it's 26.5, right? I guess.
Is it 26.5?
Whatever the standard measurement is a standard 26 or is it 25.5?
25. 25.
Then it's 25.5. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it.
The
That's it, yeah.
Ibanez
Right.
and Strats,
Right.
I suppose.
Exactly, yeah. Because the Ibanez RGD had the longer one, but I had problems with that when I play in the lower
Yeah,
positions.
I wanted to ask you about. I remember you had a longer scale
Right,
Ibanez.
right. I still have it actually. I still use it sometimes on recordings, but it makes things too difficult for me live, so I don't use it live anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've got my Strandberg, and it's a multi-scale, so it's 25 and a half on the treble side, and
Okay.
it's 26 and a quarter on top. So it's not super disgusting, but having that extra length gives it a little bit more girth. Or
Yeah, it definitely does. It definitely does. Yeah.
yeah, no, it's more stable for tunings and stuff. But
Definitely. Yeah, but this one is pretty stable because it has also these extra locks here, that you can
Right.
close. Which is so I don't really have any tuning issues with it, but I was concerned about that, right? Because I have the shorter
I think
scale.
I was more thinking of like intonation issues and tension. You can have like if you have a longer scale, you can have thinner strings,
Right.
which is nice for metal music.
Yeah.
In my
This is
taste.
true. Yeah. For me too. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you use light gauges as well?
No, I have like 10 for the high string. Like in T tuning, I use 10 here, and it's 49 for the low D, and then 59, I think, for the low A. So it's kind of in the middle.
All right. Okay. So but you're down tuned to D.
Yeah.
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 That I think that's what I would do because I play nines in standard.
In standard, yeah, that's what I would do in standard as well.
Actually,
now Ingwe plays 8, I think, right?
Yeah.
8 tuned to E flat or something like that.
I've actually started using an 8 on top because I feel like the tension on the high E is much stiffer than the B and especially the G string. Both of those strings are much more loose, so I wanted an 8 string to make them feel more similar.
I remember back in the Necrophagus days when we did Epitaph, I had we were tuned to D, but I had like a 12 for the high E string, right? But then I had much more strength in my hand before I had the dystonia, so I could do that. But it's actually not. Actually, there's no point really to doing that,
Yeah.
My opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, your fingers are not weightlifters; they are like
exactly
tools for making expressing music.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've become sort of a tech metal, the modern tech metal flag holder.
Kind of, yeah. It's weird because it's not like because the people think that's all I do or all I listen to or all I like. I'm not even, But when we started doing that stuff, that kind of term didn't even exist yet. I mean, I guess Necrophagus probably started this. What I consider the second wave of technical death metal. For me, like the first wave, probably bands like Cynic and Death and Atheist and Nocturnus and stuff like that. The 90s stuff was always in the 90s what we considered technical death metal, and then Necrophagus, I guess, with this more modern production aesthetics, kind of started this second wave. And what happened, I just played in a lot of bands of that style played in a lot of albums of that style. So I guess anyone who likes that style has heard my name before, because I'm on so many albums that it's almost impossible to not hear of my name in that genre. But I mean, I like so many other things. It's just that's probably, I guess, the albums I was on in that style were among the records that did the more successful ones. Because my own bands like Eternity's End or my solo stuff doesn't have that much traction yet, no, because I'm not touring with that stuff. There's not so much international recognition, I guess, for the other things that I do. Whereas the Necrophages, Obscura, Spawn of Possession stuff, Alkaloid is kind of more widely recognized, I guess, right? And that's why people think I'm the tech metal guru, but it's not really the case. That this is some people think this is my whole world, but for me, music is a way wider spectrum than that.
I mean, when I listen to your playing in all of the tech death contexts, I mean, I hear the Tony McAlpine and the Greg Howe and
exactly right.
Joey Tafola.
This is actually where I come from.
Yeah,
this is exactly where I come from, right? Because I mean, you know it because you know all that stuff.
Yeah,
and I guess some of the younger kids.
I come from the same place. Like a lot of my style comes from that place as well.
That's why we connect so well, right? That's why we had this. I remember when we did my second solo record, and you were doing the production. I didn't have to explain to you a lot what I want because you come from the same source of inspiration, so you completely understood, like how I wanted things to sound. Yeah. I guess it's a generation thing. That's like our generation is more grew up with that kind of stuff, and the younger kids who hear your music or my music, they might not know all the old stuff that inspired us. And then I often see this with students when I then show them like some of the Greg House stuff or Tony McAlpine stuff, and they're like, okay, now this makes sense where this comes from. And for me, it's always kind of important. I like to communicate this in my lessons, that when you like the style of someone, to kind of trace back what their influences were, to kind of understand where they were coming from historically. It doesn't mean you have to necessarily like everything, but at least to kind of get an understanding, right? When you like a certain player and you want to understand why they sound the way they do, to kind of understand the ingredients that made the player what they are. I find it's very important.
Yeah, I had like talking about that, tracing back influences. One of my favorite bands of all time is Symphony X.
Right, for me too.
Fantastic band, and Michael Romeo he's an amazing lead player.
Right.
But his songwriting and his riffs are just totally out of this world.
I agree.
And they always have those super sexy vocal melodies. It's just like amazing stuff. But then I started listening to Kansas. And I heard like, oh shit, this is a lot of it comes from. And I mean, I don't have it confirmed that Kansas was a major influence or something, but and by no means I think it's a ripoff or anything, but there are a couple of places where there are like symphonics, like a parts of the songs that are very, very similar in style and tempo and vocal melodies and there are a few places where it's very similar, which might be just by coincidence. I've done things like that myself.
Me too.
So it can happen.
Yeah. I think Michael Romeo talked about Kansas being one of his biggest influences in a couple of interviews that I've seen. I think he actually talked about it. I think there's a part in the Divine Wings of Tragedy in the song that was also in like a Kansas song, but it's actually from a classical piece. I don't remember which one it was, but like Kansas also took this from a classical piece.
All right.
And the same part also appears in a Nile song, actually. I heard it on a Nile record. Very different style, but no, he's been very open about that from what I know. That Kansas is one of the big influences in Symphony X, like on the types of chord progressions and vocal melodies that they do.
Yeah. But it's like also since when I found that, I discovered that I really liked like some of Kansas music. So yeah. So I mean
that's also the thing, right? You discover new stuff through that, like a player, and then you check interviews. What did they listen to? What did they like? And they're like, hey, maybe I don't know this player or this band, and you check it out, and that's good. It's a good thing to do.
Yeah. But I suppose now you have been doing your career for such a long time that now there's a next generation that have been influenced by you.
Right, and they don't really know the stuff that I was influenced by, right? And then when I show students, like you see when students get really interested in that, then you can see they're going to take this to places like, for example, I had a student, he was really interested in some of my leads and stuff and the concepts that I'm using, and then I started explaining, and then I explained him I didn't invent these things, right? It's like for example, if I use a Messiaen mode, I tell them I listen to Alan Holdsworth. If I do symmetrical scales, if I use superimpositions, I talk about how people like Greg Howe, Vinnie Moore influenced me to do that. But then when you trace them back, then you find players like Larry Carlton, for example, right, who did stuff like that in the 70s, maybe not on such a high technical level, but you can kind of trace it back, and then it just finds its ways into more modern kind of styles, and that's how it evolves. But I find it very, very important to trace that back. For example, if someone likes Greg Howe or Brett Garsett, but they can't really play the stuff yet because it's very difficult, and then you go, okay, maybe check out some Larry Carlton. That stuff is a little bit easier to cover and to play, but you understand the concepts, right? And then combine it with the more modern, high-tech stuff that started developing in the 80s and the 90s. And I find it very, very important. The students who do that, usually they don't sound like a copy of someone. They kind of understand it, where it comes from, and they take it to their own place and make their own thing out of it, right? And do it maybe in a different way that I would not have thought of, or something like that. Yeah.
I had a question, but I forgot it.
Oh, sorry.
So people watching, you can post questions in the chat, and I'll have a little look at what people are writing. Travis writes,
I'm just looking at here.
I'm very excited to hear more about your upcoming solo project, Christian.
Yeah. I guess he means the Void Sector Zero band. It's not really, it's kind of like a solo project because it's my band where I wrote everything, kind of like it was with Eternity's End, but it's a bit of a different style. So I wrote the whole album on my own, and now I'm recording it. It's more like it's called Void Sector Zero.
That sounds like it would be tech death.
Yeah, kind of, but not in the modern kind of sense, not in the, like, I would say, post necrophagist obscura style where there's a lot of like blast beats and super high tempos. It's more like, it's not really like a nostalgia thing, but the style it's closer to that time period where thrash metal turned into death metal, kind of like in the early 90s, you know. So the tempos, the pacing is more similar, I guess, to bands like Death or Nocturnus, or like maybe some bands like Corona or Death Row, stuff like that. Hexenhaus, for example, that was with a Swedish band with Mike Wheat. That's more like the kind of pacings that it has, but it's harsh vocals. But it's a little bit more, of course, the production aesthetics will be a little bit more modern than what those bands did. And I'm incorporating a little bit more of like my harmonic language, also things that I learned from you. You know, there's like a couple of like shifting passages, like when using like a melodic minor, sharp 4, stuff like that. So all this kind of more advanced harmonic language, I'm kind of working it into that, but it's not in the, I would say, obscura or the faceless kind of sense, but the pacings are more traditional. Drumming is a little bit more thrashy, but it's more procky, more odd meters and stuff like that. But it's not going to be like a 270 BPM blasts and sweeps high-tech clinic kind of thing. It's a little bit more I sometimes feel when you slow it down a little bit, you get a little bit more opportunities what you can do color-wise, you know, and there's a little bit more room for that. And I guess it's harmonically and rhythmically, it's a little bit more adventurous than, for example, what I'm doing in Eternity's End or what I did in Obscura. It's a little bit, I would say it's a little bit going to be like, you know, on Beyond the Wall of Sleep, like the first half of the album had these more thrashy kind of songs. It's kind of like that, but more in a band context, like vocal based. And so that's the thing I'm working on right now, hoping to release it this year, but we will see how it goes, because the other guys, I'm going to announce the lineup next week, but the other guys, they're always touring with other bands all the time, so there's a little bit sometimes setbacks, you know, with when they're available to record their parts, so I have to wait a little bit. All right. And that's the thing that's slowing it down now a little bit. Like the concept is super like sci-fi lyrics, you know, like kind of like Nocturnus did it on the Thresholds album. It's kind of like that, but not a complete Renaissance nostalgia thing. I think there's a little bit of a modern spin on it that kind of hopefully makes it unique. But ultimately, the critics will have to decide about that. You know, when you make a record, it's hard to tell yourself. But that's kind of what I hope it's going to be.
They will let you know.
They will let me know for sure.
In the comment section.
I'm not concerned. Oh yeah, that's the one thing that's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a whole different topic on its own.
Oh yeah. Also, like dealing with that sometimes it's strange, you know, how you like sometimes. I do this now since like more than 20 years, and of course, no one is going to ever like everything that you do, you know. That's not even the point. I mean, not even expecting everyone to like it, but still, sometimes some of these comments, 20 people can say something positive, and you get like one negative comment that can hit really hard sometimes, you know. Where it's like still finding ways to deal with that.
Yeah. I mean, that's like that's on us, you know, to be able to deal with that.
Right. I mean, sometimes I see some musicians react to that, and they get kind of like meltdowns online. I know that's not a good look. You know, it's better to it's better to be quiet. I mean, if you not interact too much.
It's like if you pay too much attention, it's like you feed energy back to the thing, and
negative energy. You don't want that.
Yeah, and it's gonna grow. So
yeah,
I mean, I sometimes have fun constructing a very, you know, try to be very articulate and nice in a comment, but also be, you know, slaying them with words.
Yeah, but you're good at that. You're really good at that. Like you have a good way to do this in a very positive way. You know, that like in a very positive.
Yeah,
and
maybe I can't win this person over, but the people reading it can be like, oh, this guy is a good sport.
Right.
It doesn't.
But when people react aggressively on the internet, like, and it's not good. You know, it's not good to react like that.
And I mean, I've seen a lot of people reacting in the wrong way about something, and then they have to. The shit just keeps on.
Yeah,
coming.
And the internet does not forget.
Yeah.
The internet forgets nothing.
Yeah. So
this is true.
I like all of my like meltdowns and temper tantrums that I have, I try to keep them off camera.
This is better. Yeah. This is definitely much better thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Travis asks, is Void Sector 0 instrumental? But you said it has harsh vocals.
It has harsh vocals, yeah. There's a couple of, it's mostly harsh vocals actually on this one, because I do all the clean vocal stuff in Eternity's End. So this is, for a while I was thinking, you know, if I was going to like Watchtower type of vocals on that, but it's a little bit, the nice thing about harsh vocals is you have a little bit more freedom with where you're going riff-wise, right? With clean vocals, you have to sometimes dial back.
Yeah, and I mean, if you do riffs that are in like Messiaen modes and
yeah, how are you going to sing about that?
Yeah, you do something like
like
that kind of stuff, and have someone like
it is. Yeah, and no matter how good the vocalist is, it's not going to make him look good. You know, when you do stuff like that. So I decided, like with that project, to do like specifically like harsh vocals, but more like thrashy, not like really deep death growls. It's more like this, like Coroner or like late Chuck Schuldiner kind of vocals, and a little bit more where you can understand the words. It's a little bit more like, it's not this super low growls. It's not like that.
Yeah, but you don't have any progress or had any projects where those two things meet.
You mean like clean vocals and harsh vocals?
Yeah, I mean I'm talking about basically Scar Symmetry.
Yeah. I mean, we did something like that in Alkaloid, a little bit different than you guys do it, but in Alkaloid we had like, I mean, I say we had because I left the band last year for logistic reasons, but there's clean vocals and harsh vocals actually in that band going on. Yeah. But I also know that for Flo, he's really good doing that in the studio, but it's not the easiest thing to reproduce that live if you switch between the two vocal styles.
Yeah.
I guess that's why you use two singers, right, for that, because it makes it makes it easier. Yeah. But Alkaloid kind of had that, but it's a little bit different than Scar Symmetry, but there was clean sections going on here and there.
Yeah, and I mean, I dig having harsh vocals. I mean, I like having harsh vocals, but it really makes it easy for me to write songs for Scar Symmetry, because I can just come up with whatever I want on the guitar for guitar parts,
right.
and if riff calls for a great vocal melody, I can have it. And if it doesn't work for melodies, I just have harsh vocals. And
yeah, that's what I really like about the Scar symmetry stuff. I think you guys do it really well. I think there's some other bands who try to mix it where I think it doesn't work out so good. You know, like some bands it seems a little bit forced, but I think in Scar symmetry it's like it works super perfect. You know, but I noticed when we did the Fire Within album that you're really good at with like coming up with like vocal melodies and harmonizing them and things like that. You know, like I remember we did the choirs for the Fire Within album, you were like super fast with like, okay, the harmony has to go like this, and you came up with all these harmonizations on the spot. That's actually a really good skill. You know, that's why I that's what I think I learned the most from you when we were producing these albums, how important it is to have good ears, you know, like really good ears, how much more easy it makes the work in a studio, the creative process, you know. And I guess for improvisation, that goes the same. That's why I always like to stress this to my students also, you know, how important it is to train the ears, not just the fingers.
Yeah.
You know, but like really hearing something in your mind and instantly being able to transpose it to the fretboard or to the vocals, you know, and being fast with that. That's a really good skill to have.
Yeah. I mean, that's...
How did you develop that skill actually, like to get your ears to that level?
I don't know. I think part of it is it's part, I don't know, talent or something, because I showed signs of having, you know, good ears from a pretty early age.
Okay. Yeah.
So, but I don't know. It's just something. Also, I can remember. My dad had a friend who he was a drummer, but there was this one time I played a chord and he heard me and he was like, "Oh, a 13 chord," and I was like, because I probably just had learned a 13 chord, and I was like, how the hell did he know what I played? And I hadn't really been thinking about recognizing things. I mean, obviously I was already learning from albums, and so I could already, you know, make out a lot of things myself, but I wasn't listening a lot to music that had 13 chords. So so when he could hear that, I was like, yeah, I remember that as being an early realization about that kind of thing. And then we had pitch training and stuff like that in music school. So
yeah, I had it also at the MGI. I remember that. So, but I feel like because in the past it was more normal to learn guitar by listening to albums, kind of trying to figure things out, maybe getting them wrong sometimes, but at least like you're doing the effort. And if you learn everything by tablature or by video, it's kind of like that skill tends to be a little bit underdeveloped sometimes. You know, I noticed that when people completely learn only visually instead of like just listening to something, then imagining how this could be played, maybe slowing it down, looping it, you know, and then figuring things out by ear. I think this is for me, developing my ear was really, really hard. Like it didn't come naturally to me at all. I had to train a lot for this, and I still have to. You know, it's like it's nothing that came very quickly or easy to me to have.
Yeah.
But it's such an important skill, you know.
I would say one part of it is actually paying attention to it. And actually,
definitely.
you know, being more of an active listener and analyzing things and analyzing sounds, because I didn't understand how we could hear that it was a 13 chord, but you know, it wasn't before too long that I discovered myself how to recognize like chords that were more difficult than just triads.
Right. Yeah. This when I'm transcribing, like, I mean, transcribing lead parts and stuff like this is pretty easy for me. But when it comes to chords, like bigger chords, you know, like figuring out the voicings, I still have troubles with that sometimes, you know, like knowing which is when you hear like big 4-note chords or something like this, to get the voicing exactly correct, that's hard for me still. Yeah.
And I mean, when we talked about arranging vocal harmonies in my late teens when I went to a music school, part of my practicing routine, because I was, you know, I had 1 hour of alternate picking, 1 hour of sweep picking, 1 hour of fretboard visualization, and then I had like 1 hour of writing like classical 4-part harmony. And,
Okay, yeah.
and did things like that, and harmonizing melodies and writing 4-part harmonies. So when I was 19, I started at the new school, at music school, and it was during a time where I had an injury in my left hand, in my fretting hand.
I remember that. You told me that, yeah.
So I couldn't play for a few months. So I started this school, and I was like, oh, I'm playing guitar, and everyone was like, oh, we don't know who this guy is. And they asked me, what kind of music do you play? I play metal music, and I think they were mostly into like jazz and funk and more serious.
How it goes in these schools, yeah.
music and so on. So there was one guy who told me about this a couple of years ago. And if you people listening to this have heard me talk about this, I'm sorry to tell it again, but because I think it's a fun story. It was fun for me to hear it from his perspective. But we had, I think like that guy, he confessed that he thought that maybe when he heard me say that, like, oh, metal music is the best, he thought that maybe, I wasn't too talented or too smart or anything. So then we had our first pitch training lesson where there was this guy at the piano, and he played a melody 3 times, and he said like, oh, this is in B flat major, I'm going to start on the note D. And it's in 3/4, and then he counted in, and then he played a pretty simple melody, and then he played it 3 times, and we were notating it, and some people got it right, immediately, and some people took more times, and some people were really struggling with it. So when the teacher had played all 3 times, my classmate, he was looking at me and like, that guy is still writing. Is he? I'm careful with my words now, so I don't use any of the words you can't use anymore. But maybe you know what I'm thinking about. So so he was wondering what I was doing, and then like he leaned over and looked at my paper, and I can't remember this, but he told me that I transcribed the melody, and then I harmonized it, and I wrote 4-part. Like a harmonic arrangement. so I thought that was just funny. So that's where it comes from. I took that really seriously as I did sweep arpeggios and all of the other things.
Yeah, because it is. Yeah. I mean, the good thing is you get ear training every time you listen to music or work on music. That's what I noticed, right? But you have to be, like you say, you have to take it seriously. You have to be conscious about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So are you? I mean, I know you're interested in and versed in theory.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
But always from you, I can always learn a couple of new things, especially how to apply them. Yeah.
Did you ever feel that, like having that analytical brain about music? Did you ever have a time where you felt that it was hindering your appreciation of music?
No, because it's really weird that like some people, especially in Germany, like in the more like underground death and black metal things, people are always like, no, I don't want to learn theory because otherwise I cannot write so freely anymore, But the thing is, no matter how much you know about theory, if you want to write nonsense stuff, like the old death and thrash bands did, who didn't really know what they were doing, it was more intuition and a lot of like accidental stuff, you can still do that, right? I mean, sometimes I write songs that are not based on any kind of scales or tonalities. For example, the last Obscura record, there was this song called Devoured Usurper. And a lot of the riffs, there's like this typical old school death metal chromatic stuff going on where you can't really say it fits into any like existing scale or something. It might start off like a blues scale, but it has like a flat 9 in it or something like that. Or sometimes it's really just chromatic where it's like, it's not even half whole diminished or something. You can still do that, I feel, right? Because if I want to write a nonsense riff that doesn't make sense but sounds good, I can still do that without having to give it a name. I always feel like the theory is more like a toolkit that I can use if I want to create certain colors, right? But if I can also throw it all out of the window and just write a song like the guys in Entombed would have done it in the 90s, who didn't know, probably, I don't know, but probably didn't really know what kind of scales they were using and were just, using
Yeah.
intuition. And I also feel you can combine both of that in the same song. I mean, I can have like a nonsense riff and then have it followed by a really well thought out constructed chord progression or something where I then apply my knowledge to create certain sounds that I feel I wouldn't be able to create otherwise if I didn't know what I was doing. Right.
And I'm thinking that if you play something, you find a sound or something, a structure that you like, that your ears are drawn to, but you don't know how to explain it in theory, that it doesn't connect with what you already know, it doesn't mean that it's not covered by music theory anywhere else.
That's true. That's true.
Maybe it's a sound that's cool and theoretically it's yet to be conquered.
Yeah, there's a really interesting story to that. Remember when we did the Beyond the Wall of Sleep album, and there was this, in the title track, there was this tapping lick that's like this Holdsworth kind of sound, and it was the only time I saw you go like, oh, what are you doing there? That sounds interesting, and you didn't hear it instantly what it was, because normally you could everything I played, you would always instantly know what it is.
Yeah.
And you figured it out, and I'm like, oh, that's the Holdsworth scale. Like, it was the Messiaen Mode 3, and I didn't really know that was the name, because what happened was a few years before we did the Spawn of Possession, I did the Spawn of Possession record in Cursor, and in the opening song, where Angels Go Demons Follow, there was a riff that I had to solo over, and I was looking at the notes in the riff, and they didn't fit into any scale that I knew at the time. So it was like 6 notes, and I think the notes were like, it was D, E, F, F sharp, C, and C sharp, basically. And I was like, so it was
come again, D, E, F?
D, E, F, then F sharp, and then C and C sharp. And then I was like, what am I going to play over that, right? And then I noticed I had like 2 chromatic bits, like C, C sharp, D, and I had E, F, F sharp. So I noticed these 2 chromatic bits were like a major third apart. And I was like, 6 notes is not enough to make up some cool lines. I need some more notes. So I was like, I just add another major third on top with the same. So G sharp, A sharp, right? So I get like a 9-note scale, but then around the D. So you get D, E, F, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, C, C sharp, which actually, as you told me later, is the Holdsworth scale, Messiaen mode number 3, basically.
Yeah.
That you can obviously use over a lot of things. But when I applied it in that Spawn of Possession song, I had even though I was a big Holdsworth fan already at the time, I had no idea that's what he's actually doing, and that's actually a thing. So I was like, oh, I made up this cool scale on my own, by using logic, and like you said, obviously it was covered already by music theory. I just didn't know it at that point, right? It's someone like Messiaen had actually given it a name, and that it's actually a thing that Holdsworth, for example, uses a lot. But at that point, at the time, I had no idea. It was more like something.
I had a sound that I didn't understand. Something that I've like played or like used when I've been experimenting just on the keyboard. Let's see. All right, so this kind of sound. So I'm playing an F major chord here, and a high D on top. So you have the F, and then you have the F sharp in D. So listen to this.
D major over F major.
Yeah. And to me, this sounds great. But like, I already know, and I use that D can be on top of an F, like this kind of sound. So it's like symmetrical diminished.
Of course, yeah. Get that inside.
But to me, this sounds way more major, and then I discovered that if you put some Lydian stuff in between, it's really beautiful. And that's a completely different sound then. It's super opposite. Oops.
But how do you explain it? Because I mean, the F sharp gives you the flat 9,
yeah,
which is
and
not part
I mean,
of the Lydian tonality.
I saw an interview with Jacob Collier where he talked about super Lydian.
Okay.
And it's like, and he showed it in a video like this. If you take Lydian and you stack thirds like you would do when you create like more jazz chords, and you do Lydian.
Right.
So you have 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, sharp 11,
Sharp 11, 13.
13. What happens when you keep stacking?
Well, after 13, you come back to the 1, no? You come back
and
I mean, it's like a major third now.
Yeah, and like this is a disappointing sound, and he argued that. And this is actually nicer in a way.
That's interesting. So you're from the 13, you stack up a major third, and then how do you continue? You continue the same way.
Same way. So it's like major third, minor third, major third, minor third. Whoops.
Okay. So basically from the
Whoops.
So from the 13 on, you're doing D Lydian basically.
Yes.
Okay, interesting. Okay, I heard Holdsworth talk about the thing that's also in the Slonimsky pattern, Taurus of melodic patterns, that there's like scales where the second octave is different from the first one.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I've started dabbling with those a little bit, and it's like the Messiaen scales, are based from dividing an octave into equal parts.
Equal parts, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So what happens? What happens if you divide an octave, 2 octaves, into equal parts? Like you divide 2 octaves into 3 parts. That's like a augmented fifths or minor.
Of course,
sixths.
because if you go to half steps, you get like 24, and you divide them by 3, so you get 8 half steps between each. So you get that makes sense.
If I do something like,
of course,
that's to me a really interesting sound.
Okay, so you would take 2 octaves, you divide them in equal steps, however many you want to do, and then you fill them up logically. Like for example, you add like, for example, a whole step and a half step to each of the notes or something like that.
Yeah. So, like, easy thing you could do is like play a minor triad, and then you just move it up in minor sixth.
Okay. Right.
Or you do a major triad and the ninth, and you move it up.
Interesting.
So
okay.
So if you do something like so you have that. Or if it's
interesting.
Or if you're in Mixolydian and you start on the B flat. It's a cool sound, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's very Holdsworth, that sound.
It is, and so that's something I've just started exploring, and I also
interesting
started using that 9-note Messiaen scale a little bit. Sorry, everyone, it turns out into some lesson bits here, but I just love this stuff so much.
For me, it's super beneficial, because I mean, I will definitely experiment with that.
So
in the weeks to come.
Yeah. So what I'm doing is, when I'm soloing over something. Let's do E Mixolydian. So, and if I have a little 3-note thing, and I continue that down in major thirds, till I come back, and then I can squeeze things in like that, like. Oops.
This is fascinating.
So I'm sort of going in between Mixolydian and that scale, and I'm not really thinking at all about the key, and it's just it works best for me if I have like a minor third phrase with a note in between, you know.
Right. You can also visualize this easily on the fretboard. Right.
But you can also do it like.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, because like some of these bigger like Messiaen scales are the bigger ones that obviously they include other scales as well, right? So if you take Messiaen mode number 3, you also get like included Hungarian minor, for example, is part of the scale. You just leave out a couple of notes. So you got certain scales within the bigger ones.
Yes.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. I mean, in the Slonimsky thesaurus of scales melodic patterns, I think he does that 2-octave thing in there, right, as well.
He does, and more octaves as well, I think.
See, but this is the first time that I've really heard that applied and kind of okay, that's how it makes sense, you know.
Yeah. And like how to divide an octave into like 2 octaves into several parts. Right. That's something that it's a pretty recent thing for me, and obviously that these kinds of sounds I don't really use them too much in the music I make because I don't prefer them in scar symmetry for most of the time.
Right. But that's the thing with a lot of Holdsworth stuff. Or, for example, I notice when a lot of people get into it in the beginning, they think, "Oh, he's playing wrong notes." Like hearing the difference between intentional chromatism, outside notes, and random is difficult in the beginning, right? Until the ear is kind of accustomed to that.
Actually, when I listen to some older Holdsworth stuff, like 70s stuff, where a lot of his playing was brilliant, I can hear sometimes that he's using the ideas that he developed later. I can hear that they are still in their infancy, and some of the things when he's playing outside, they don't sound as nice and like buttery as later. So some of them are a bit harsh sounding, and it's like he's testing things.
Right, but I guess it's also because back in those days he was recording everything like in more or less live, and later on he started doctoring his stuff a little bit, so it became he was also a perfectionist in the studio, right, later on. So of course the later stuff is more refined in that sense, I guess.
Yeah. We're gonna take another question. So Travis is really on point with the questions here. So would love to hear of your other interests, especially the fusion interests. I suppose that's a little bit what we're talking about now. Travis says he used to take lessons with Brett Stein, and he talked about your interest in his Holdsworth work.
Yeah, because actually I met Brett Stein and his brothers. You know Brett, right, Per? You know who Brett Stein is from Hachi's Kitchen? Was a Shrapnel Records band, actually.
Yeah, I didn't really know him from that band. I don't think I've yet heard them, but we're friends on Facebook and we have exchanged some messages and so on.
Yeah, you would get along really well because Brett also really loves to talk scales and stuff like that. So Brett Brett and his brother Scott Stein, they're both really amazing guitar players, and they're all around this Derek Taylor circle. You remember this band Criminy that Derek Taylor did,
Yeah,
where
yeah.
Derek Taylor played
I've got the
guitars, and
Cryman
Scott
album.
Stein, right? And the bass player on that, Scott Stein, is the brother of Brett Stein, and Scott is actually
All
a
right.
guitar player, but he played bass on that record. And after Criminy, this band turned into Hachi's Kitchen, which is kind of they sound kind of like a mix between Alice in Chains and Razor X. So they have this Alice in Chains kind of like a little bit more sophisticated grunge kind of sound, but then they have like double lead guitar solos like Razor X that did this like huge pentatonic wide stretch runs with the double tapping stuff like the Derek Taylor stuff, but they kind of
Yeah.
did this in a twin guitar context. So I really loved this first album, and my friend Danny from Alkaloid was a big fan of Hachi's Kitchen, and me too. And then of course I met Brett through Facebook, and we started talking, and then we were on tour with Obscura in 2022. We played in Texas, in Dallas, and I invited the Stein brothers to the show, and they came to the show, and I was really nervous because I mean they're like really amazing guitar players, and I played a really bad show because what happened was it was super cold. Normally it's pretty warm around. It was in February, so 3 years ago now. Normally around that time of the year, it's warm enough, in Texas to do an open air show. It wasn't at an open air kind of venue, but it was super cold. It was almost freezing. So everybody was on stage playing with long sleeve, but I was playing in my t-shirt because like I got the balls to play in a shirt, but it was really so fucking cold. And from the third track on, I couldn't feel my fingers anymore.
Oh
And
no.
then together with the dystonia, of course, that creates a very unfortunate situation. And I got through the show, but I felt actually quite embarrassed because like my Stein brothers are here. You want to play some of my guitar heroes growing up. You really want to give a good show, and then I personally felt I didn't play very well. But the thing is, with professional players like that, I mean, they know the reality of that, of this
Yeah.
of being live on a stage, and sometimes these things happen. And they actually said it sounded good, and they did. It's not like they stopped talking to me after that or lost respect or something like that. So probably it wasn't as bad as I thought, but I didn't feel too good about it. But now they were like, "Oh, great show," and stuff like that. And yeah, and so Brett at that time he was working on that book that he now released, which is the this book about where he analyzes the Alan Holdsworth style. Like there's tons of transcriptions, and he explains everything note for note, and with all the bebop scales Holdsworth uses, and the stuff that you're talking about, and the symmetrical scales, and it got really deep into that. And Brett did like this mathematical thing where he really narrowed on how many scales there are in total, like 2000 something. If you do any
Yeah, yeah.
mathematical combination of notes, that's possible. And he gets really into that, and he actually sent me the book, and I started getting into it a little bit, and it's really nice to kind of how to say, like it cracks the code a little bit to kind of what Holdsworth is doing, because in the beginning for me everything was so abstract and far away that like I don't understand the thing. But now a lot of things start to make more sense, similar to when you started explaining things to me, like the use of harmonic major, for example, and different modes.
Mm.
And then when you start using it a little bit in your own playing, suddenly you can start to hear it, right? When I listen to some Holdsworth records and like, okay,
Yeah.
now here he's doing like what you call a melodic minor sharp 4, or I call it like a Lydian flat 3 or something, and you start to
Hmm.
pick these things out. Yeah, but as of more to the question, I mean, I've always been interested in fusion music. I mean, I think since so in the 90s, I got all these REH tapes, in the 90s. I know you had some of those also.
Yeah.
And I got the Richie Kotzen one, where he was really young, but he was like doing all these legato runs and big sweeps. And of course, I wanted to track down some of his records. And then I got hold of that album Killed, which he did together with Greg Howe,
Hmm.
which is more like a rock fusion thing. And that was the first time it's like, man, this is more advanced harmony, sounds more jazzy. I started really getting more into that. And then a friend of mine came back from Los Angeles, and he had a tape on the first, that was the Mark Varney project, the one with Alan Holdsworth and Frank Gambale. And on the backside was the second one, which was Frank Gambale, Sean Lane, and Brett Garsett.
Yeah.
And of course,
Scary
my
stuff.
first, yeah, scary stuff. But and of course, at that time, I mean, it was super abstract for me. But the thing, because I was always a metal fan, and the thing that I could relate to, because I couldn't really get into traditional jazz, because
Hmm.
at that time, because I had a hard time liking the sound of a clean guitar.
Yeah.
But then with those guys, the technique that they used and the sound aesthetics were more similar to what metal players were doing, or what the shrapnel guys were doing, but then in the harmonic kind of context where the language was more jazzy. And even though back then I didn't really have a clue, I didn't understand anything they were doing, I was like, this is cool because I understood that this is like top level kind of musicianship, and then I started listening to that. And then obviously when I went to the Munich Guitar Institute, for a year, of course, I had to spend a lot of time with jazz, playing jazz standards, learning them, all the fretboard navigation, and then kind of combining that. And I was still a horrible improviser, but I think what it did, like, it opened my mind to more advanced harmonic kind of language, which I try to incorporate here and there where it's possible into my style. And this is, I guess, where my fusion influence comes from. But I'm by no means a fusion player, because fusion playing for me always relates back to improvisation. Like most of those fusion guys, they improvise, and I am not that good at it sometimes. But I'm not like you or Brett, that I could just like improvise over stuff like that. And it sounds great. I have to sit down and think a little bit longer about how I'm going to make it sound the way it does. Probably has to do with my dystonia also, because I can't just improvise as fluently because my finger rings are limited. So with everything I play, I have to think 3 times harder than someone with functioning fingers. Like, how am I gonna put that on a fretboard so I can actually play it? That's why for me improvisation is a little bit harder to do. But been always fascinated by just the harmonic language and a lot of these lines that these people play, right? Because a lot of metal players, you see them either play fast scales or fast arpeggio sequences or something, but the fusion guys, they played lines, like long, complex lines with more harmonic, rhythmic, melodic kind of information in it, which I found more interesting than just playing a scale sequence or just playing a fast arpeggio, but more like a little bit more smart, the approach to what they are playing. So I guess this is where my fusion influence comes from. And then, of course, like I said before, I trace these players back, right? So I'm reading interviews by Brett Garrett or Greg Howe, and then they talk about Larry Carlton, or they talk about George Benson or something, Robin Ford, and then I start listening to that stuff, which is not like, especially Robin Ford, Larry Carlton stuff is not as technically flashy as those guys. So it's a little bit easier to transcribe the lines and actually play them. I don't need like this warp speed kind of like technique, but you can understand, like, okay, this is where those guys got it from. And so nowadays I can also, of course, enjoy like a Pat Metheny or Pat Martino or George Benson record where they play with clean tone. But when I was younger, of course, that was too far away from me. But these more like high-tech fusion players were kind of the gateway also to appreciate more traditional jazz or more laid-back fusion stuff and get into that as well. Yeah.
And something about when you solo in jazz and fusion, you typically can go on for as long as you want. Like, solos are longer. The music
more freeform.
And the music in itself allows for more space.
This is true.
In your playing. And there's something about just playing distorted electric guitar. You try to take a little break and then you get feedback or something like, ooh, the string noise and like we are really.
You have to control it, right? It's like an animal you have to control.
Yeah. So I think that's a part of why we like to, when we play metal high gain sound, we like to vomit out notes.
Yeah, the notes. This is
because it doesn't sound good to just stop playing.
Yeah. What's interesting, I took a couple of theory lessons, and it was also about like symmetrical scales, similar to stuff that you just showed me, with a saxophone player, because the music school I was teaching at, there was a saxophone player, and he played all this like Messiaen modes and stuff. He was practicing the stuff all the time, and I was like, man, this sounds like Alan Holdsworth, the kind of stuff that he's playing on a saxophone. So I took a couple of theory classes with him, and I noticed a very big difference, because I was like, man, this would take me so long to get this on the instrument, to play it and improvise with it. And he said, the big difference between jazz players and metal players is the metal players, they practice the stuff at home until they can play it, and then they go out on stage and then they kind of perform it. But the jazz players, they also practice the stuff on stage for a couple of years, because in jazz music, the mistakes is a part of the whole experience. In metal, especially nowadays with the modern production aesthetics, you don't want any mistakes, any timing errors, any wrong intonations, any like all the records had this more rawness. You don't really have that anymore with the production aesthetics, and the mistakes are really like not really allowed. Also on stage, people want to see like a perfect reproduction of what you do on the album. Whereas in jazz music, like trying things and maybe even failing or like not doing them correctly is a part of the whole experience, right? Whereas metal music is more like nowadays very more like a rehearse and perform kind of thing, which is very, very different. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And like with Scar Symmetry, we play to a click, We have
Hmm.
tracks. We have both
We did the same, no score, yeah.
keyboards and bass on tracks these days.
Hmm.
We don't have a
Hmm.
bass player. Uh,
Right.
so it's nice because we can make it sound pretty good and tight, and
Hmm.
so there's something that feels very safe about it, and it makes
Yeah, yeah.
for a very powerful experience for the audience.
Hmm.
Uh, and I do improvise some of my solos,
Hmm.
either the whole solo or just bits and pieces of it.
Uh,
Uh, but other than that, it's very much just like playing the album, and
right.
so I kind of dig that for the music we do, but I really enjoy not doing that. I really
Hmm.
enjoy doing shows. I do some kind of jazz style shows these days, also
Okay.
where
With a
uh,
band, or how
yeah,
do you do that? What kind of setup?
there's an Icelandic singer. She lives in Stockholm for many years now, but she's
Hmm.
from Iceland, and she's got her own albums with her own music, which
Hmm.
is like jazz adjacent. It's more like pop, singer
Hmm.
songwriter pop with a twist. So, but she plays with a lot of jazz musicians, and she's made some like proper jazz albums as well. So,
Hmm.
she's got like a rotating ensemble of players that she plays with, and she plays kind of regularly in the Stockholm area.
Hmm.
So I've done like 5 or 6 shows with her the past
Okay.
couple of
Okay.
years, and
Uh-huh.
most of the time it's Morgan Ågren on drums and Henrik from Dirty Loops on bass.
Oh, wow.
And
Amazing.
yeah, and
Yeah.
we've done a few shows with a keyboard player as well. And then
Hmm.
other times she works with other guitar players as well, but it's really fun because she lets us really play over the songs. So
Uh-huh.
we take long
Uh-huh.
solos, and we start a song and we don't have any idea what direction it's gonna take. And sometimes the solo sections we just venture very far off from where we started, and then we try to come back for the final chorus, the final vocal part, and
Hmm.
and it's just like there's no click, there's no MIDI, there's no
Hmm.
automatic preset changes, and
Hmm.
it's all it's all ears,
Right, right, right.
feeling the room, looking
Hmm.
at each other, trying to predict what's going to happen next, and suddenly the bass player starts playing like chords. So then
Hmm.
I'm like, oh shit, I was playing chords in the same registers. I need to move
Uh-huh.
up and play instead of playing that
Right.
I if he's playing the basic thing, then I'll do the upper structure,
Right, right, right.
and I try
Okay,
to
yeah.
get
Yeah.
into that. So and
Hmm.
it's super rewarding when we both find our spot, and when magic happens. It's a lot of fun. So
Right, because you have the freedom that this can actually happen there, right? Which of course you don't have that when everything is like super rehearsed and everyone just plays exactly the same
yeah,
every night.
so
Yeah.
so there's something
Yeah.
about that. Obviously, the audience is typically much smaller than when I play
Of
metal
course.
music.
Sure. Sure.
But there's something that is just so incredibly gratifying to
Yeah.
throw oneself out like that, and when you land on both feet,
Hmm.
it's just very
Yeah.
nice.
For me, it's a little bit strange because before, like back in the late 90s or before I got into playing really technical, when the first stuff that I played was more like blues and rock stuff, back then I was listening to like AC/DC and Hendrix and stuff like that. And I think I was listening to Gary Moore already back then or something like that,
Hmm.
but I was not yet into the flashy stuff, like it was before I got into Ingwe and Paul Gilbert and stuff like that. And sometimes I feel like I could play more free before I was thinking too much about what I'm actually doing. I was more brave to just improvise something, and then of course I wasn't very good at it, but I was daring to do things. But later on, I feel way more inhibited now to do that because I'm so afraid of like, especially because of playing technical metal, you're so afraid of like kind of making a mistake or something like that, that I feel
Hmm.
my improv skills, they kind of disappeared when I started getting too technical, maybe too square, so to say. Um, it's really hard for me sometimes to work that back. Like that's on the new Metamorphosis album that came out on Friday. There's like two solos on it that were improvised, but it's like when I do that, it's not a first take. Obviously, I play over it like 20, 25 times, and then already I kind of know a little bit where I'm going. So it's not like when I say improvise, it's not like I hear it for the first time and it's just the first take that I do, and this is what you hear on the album. But it's like I play with recorded probably a couple of times on the best one where I'm like, okay, I'm using that one. I mean, maybe I cut it together from two takes, you know?
Yeah, I'm getting curious then how you come up with your solos. Like, are you improvising when, like, writing the solos? Is improvisation a part of that?
Yeah, I don't really compose them like in the guitar profile where the song is. Maybe sometimes when it's like, of course, when it's like harmonized arpeggio sections or something where two guitars, of course, that stuff is pre-composed. But usually I play over it, but short segments. I set the locator and just play over a couple of bars and try a couple of ideas. And then when I have something that I like, then I maybe re-record it, clean it up, you know, and then I go to the next section. That's kind of how I do it. Sometimes, of course, if I do like a really complex line, like this Messiaen mode line and Beyond All Asleep, I really sit down sometimes and I write the line out because I can't just play it out of nowhere because I have to rehearse the line before I can actually play it. But it's more like I would say it's like a slow motion improvisation. So it's not a real time improvisation, but more like a slow motion where I go 2 or 3 bars, think about what I can do, then define it, refine it, and then go to the next. That's usually how I do it.
Yeah, I mean the thing I want to get to is that I'm feeling like you can improvise and you are improvising. It's just that you're not doing it all in real time.
Exactly. Like that's kind of the thing.
I would guess that if it just started being something you would do more often, if you ever would feel like it, I think it's probably something that you would get into really, really quickly. If you just
probably,
let yourself.
Right, I probably have to speed up my thought process practice to have the thought process happen a little bit more quickly, right? I guess, I mean, the big thing that gets in the way for me is the Estonia because I'm basically limited to using 3 fingers and this finger usually does this. So I always have to think, okay, you know, how do I do that? I just can't play as freely anymore. And that's why it takes longer for me to find my own way of playing the thing on the fret. But there's a couple of things because I play differently now. I use different techniques than before, where I'm like some of them already became intuitive. So I guess I probably could improvise with some of the workarounds that I got used to, right? But not not as freely as I could do it if all fingers were just if the transmission from the brain to the fingers, like if it would work in real time, I didn't have this handicap. I guess it would work a little bit quicker, but that's obviously a thing that's getting in the way for me. But I think Django Reinhardt, for example, he played with 2 fingers. I think he improvised, or was Django just playing pre-rehearsed lines? I don't know about that. Do you know that Django Reinhardt, if he would improvise stuff, or
I would guess it was improvised. Yeah, I would be surprised if he wrote in Guitar Pro first.
No, of course not. It would have been interesting. Yeah. But I guess it comes down to like also like you say in a live situation where improvisation, of course, you have no guarantee that it's going well all the time, right? You have to live with also like things going not so well sometimes.
Yeah, I actually remember the first time I had to improvise in front of an audience, and I must have been like maybe 13, and we had a band. Maybe I was 12, so I had only been playing for like 2 or 3 years, and we did a show with my then band, and we played for friends and classmates and parents, and I had just learned a pentatonic scale, and I had one solo spot in one song, and I remember being on stage with my Strat copy and like it's in A minor, and I started playing solo, and I was like, I don't know what to do. I just know I'm gonna do something with this.
Right. Yeah. That's how my first solos were also like,
Yeah.
yep.
And then people
Yeah,
applauded, and I was like, oh, holy crap.
yeah,
But it's
yeah.
like,
That,
I mean, the main thing is to just start doing it, because I have people
right.
who like, how do I improvise, and it's like the jazz guy probably meant, it's like you can
Yeah.
only prepare so much. Like you have to throw yourself out there, and I mean, you can it's like, even if you would, like, or anyone, if you would practice improvising at home to backing tracks, you know, for hours and hours, and sort of perfecting it, it's like,
Right.
it's still not going to be the same until you have an audience and maybe even a band. But pretty much, like, if you have an audience, if you can't just press stop and go back when you feel like you're sucking, when you have
Right.
to,
Right.
when it's live and it's raw, and whatever you play, you will have to live with that happened.
Right.
And if it
Right.
sucked, you just have to, you know, accept that that's what happened. And it's also like, you
Right.
play a lick, you play an, or maybe you play an idea, would be maybe a better word, and you do something, and it doesn't turn out where you wanted it, then you just move on. Maybe you build the next idea off of what just happened, and
Right. Right.
and
Yeah.
you just have to start doing it.
Yeah, this is true. This is true. Yeah. Yeah, I guess this is really like especially nowadays with, I guess, with modern production techniques, I think it's really the tech metal thing developed in such a like perfected kind of thing. It's so far away from improvisation and, for example, even like playing blues or stuff like that, where like improvised solos are actually thing, or interaction with the band or something like that,
Yeah.
And I guess it's true, especially, I guess the thing is, if you spend too much time doing just the one thing, it's good to have like different kind of musical outlets and experiences to allow yourself these other forms of making music as well, right? Not only the robotic, super perfect, like reproduction.
Yeah. I recently did a guest solo for a project, or I mean, I played like 4 solos on the album, so it's more than just a guest solo, I suppose. And so there was this one song, the solo section is in 13/16, I think, so it's like a kind of difficult odd meter, and then it changes chord every bar, so it's kind of tricky. So I started recording it like in bits, and I like punched in and did one chord or 2 chords at a time, and tried to have nice transitions in between the chords, and then was kind of a long solo, and when I was like halfway through, and I thought, like, individually all the ideas were really cool, and I came up with some sick lines, but then I just listened back to it, and it was like, this sounds like absolute rubbish, because there's no flow. So I just had to delete everything and start over, and try to go for more of an improvised approach. So there's something, that I get, like, as for myself at least, when if I cut things up too much into too small pieces, it's sometimes that makes it sound unmusical for me.
Yeah.
Though I definitely sometimes write and record solos in quite small
Yeah,
chunks.
sure, I do the same sometimes. I think it kind of depends really on the section, right? What it kind of calls for.
Yeah, I mean, this riff was also kind of groovy and spacey, and it called for more natural kind of pauses.
Right.
If
More
it's
openness,
like
right?
blast beats and
It's very different.
then
Very different.
you can probably just like puke out notes, and that's what you want to hear as well.
Right. Yeah.
So Sentient number 6 asks, what about the status of the next Eternity's End album? You done three
It's
albums, right?
we did three, and now we're working on the fourth one, basically. And what's the status? Well, it's still pre-production is nearing completion. So right now we're working on vocal melodies and lyrics. I'm doing all of this and then communicating with the singer. And because I'm not really a good singer myself, so what I'm doing is I'm playing the vocal melodies on the guitar on the demo, so he gets the idea. But then to get the lyrics, I sometimes sing them like an octave lower into my phone, like so he
Yeah.
kind of gets the pacing of the words and things like that. And it's a very embarrassing and annoying work for me, but yeah, that's the state we're in right now because the whole album is demoed, and now it comes to the vocal pre-production.
Who's in the band now?
Still Hannes Grossmann on drums
Mm-hmm.
and Linus Klausenitzer on bass. Linus returned on the second album was actually Mike Lepont from Symphony X, but the thing is, I wanted then to have, but it was before I moved to Mexico. I was like, I want to have a record, a lineup for the third record that I can all from Europe, so we could potentially play live. But then all the offers and stuff, like it just wasn't worth it financially, and then I didn't do it anyway. But that was the idea for the third record. That's why on the third record I got an all-European lineup. We got Yuri Sansoon from Hebra. He's from Brazil, but he moved to Portugal, so he's actually in Europe on vocals. So the last album was him on vocals, Hannes Grossmann on drums, Linus Klausnitzer on bass, and me on guitars, and Justin Hombach on guitars as the second guitar player.
Oh yeah.
So and Jimmy wasn't on keyboards anymore because the third record was more like stripped down, but Jimmy actually returned now for this upcoming record. So the upcoming record is going to have keyboards as well. So we're going to have some keyboard solos. It's still more guitar driven, but some people missed that on the third record because they really liked the keyboard aspect of it, of the first Return This End record.
Is there going to be a lot of harpsichord?
Not a little bit, not as much as on the first one. Remember on the first one, almost every song had like a arpeggio section that was doubled with the harpsichord. But because I always want to do that, but it was like, okay, now I did it. The new one is going to have some stuff like that, but not as much as like the first one. But yeah, it's definitely going to be like that. But there's also going to be there's actually going to be two songs actually have blast beats, which we never had in Eternity's End before. But doesn't happen a lot in power metal, but we have two songs with blast beats actually, and some more progressive stuff also with more like solo parts with like keyboard pads where the chords are a little bit bigger, more key changes, a little bit more harmonically advanced than what we did on the older stuff. So I guess it's going to be a little bit more progressive and a little bit more adventurous than it's like a combination of the last three. But yeah, so that's what we did because Ian, who sang on the first record, on the second we then started working with Yuri from Brazil. Because we changed the style a little bit, it became a little bit more speed metal oriented. So right now I'm always jumping back and forth between the Void Sector Zero and the Eternity's End pre-production. And in both bands right now it's like working on the vocal melodies or vocal patterns for Void Sector Zero and lyrics and stuff like that. And this is also very, very hard part about it because I always feel even with Void Sector Zero, which is more like harsh vocals, but the vocal patterns, like the vocals can really make or break a record, right? The music can be good and the riffs and everything, but if the vocal patterns, for example, aren't catchy or accessible, like this really defines in the end if it's going to be a good song or if it's just going to be
because
rubbish that goes nowhere.
People mainly listen to the vocals even when it's harsh vocals.
Right, it's the first thing that people connect with, right? And then maybe later on all the rest kind of builds up to it. And that's kind of why I think like bands, for example, like Death or Cannibal Corpse were very successful in the death metal realm because they're very smart about how to place rhythmically the patterns, and it became kind of catchy like that. And I think also Mohammed in Necrophages was really good at that. And I think a big reason why Epitaph is very successful is that the vocal patterns are very smartly placed, very minimalistic, but very smart in bits and pieces. And that was the thing that was instantly catchy, even though there was a lot going on in the music, too much to get it on the first listen. But the vocal patterns were kind of catchy, right? And I feel like that's a big part of the success of a band, right? Because if this is done well, then the people connect with something on the first listen, then they go back to it and then they listen to it again. And I guess a lot of people make the mistake to cluster everything with words and vocals and stuff like that, and then there's no room to kind of make this catchy or groovy or anything. And the vocals play a big role in that, I feel.
Do you write like the instrumental parts before you concern yourself with the vocals?
For the most part, Void Sector Zero, yes, because it's all kind of like harsh vocal stuff. But Eternity's End, for example, sometimes I start with a chorus melody. So sometimes I have like a chorus melody in my head, at least for the chorus, which starts first, and I find the chords for it. And usually the chorus parts are more open, is where the guitars really just play power chords, whereas the riff, verses or bridges might be more busy and riff based, and then have like melodies on top of that. So sometimes the chorus melody is there first, you know, but most of the time I start like writing very guitar centric and then write the vocal melodies in the next step. This comes, of course, from my love for like death and thrash metal, where the rhythm guitar is just busy. Where I feel a lot of power metal, even in the verse of the guitars are like just doing that, you know. That's a little bit too boring for me. But then, of course, when you want clean vocals and you want to make all of this sound good, sometimes can be a little bit tricky, right? I remember there was a part on the second Eternus end record, super technical riff that was almost like Spawn of Possession style riffing, counterpoint guitars going up and down, and then on top of that, a clean vocal melody. And then, of course, in the mix, making everything audible is really difficult. Then you have the big keyboard pad as well, you know, that covers a lot of frequencies. And then, of course, the vocal melody is the main thing. But then you have guitars that are going boop, boop, all the time in the background, you know.
Yeah.
And I noticed this is sometimes just too much, because then you kind of waste a riff like that, because the first thing that people get drawn to is the vocal melody. So I try to find a good balance between still having busy and cool riffing, but still having enough room for the vocal melody to go somewhere. And it's a bit of a challenge sometimes, you know.
Yeah. I agree totally. Like my that's exactly my own experience with things.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I like listening to like old like Stratovarius or Halloween stuff, but then when it's really just power chords all the time, that's really not what I want to play. You know, kind of. Oh, I remember this. We didn't talk about this yet. When you did the guest keyboard solo on the first Eternus end record.
Yeah, can't remember exactly.
You're right, but I saw you improvised it on the spot. That was really cool, because you were listening to that track. It was the Hourglass, I think, right? And you were, there should be a keyboard solo on that track.
Yeah, there was
and then you started improvising.
Yeah, there was that part where, yeah, it was like that part that it was a cool part, but in the midst of everything else, it was missing something.
Didn't
because everything
yeah.
else had a solo or a great vocal part, and that was just like a riff that needed something.
Exactly. Yeah. And I remember you had this like smaller kind of keyboard next to you.
Yeah, just like a little MIDI controller.
That. Right, but it was so cool to see like these lines. You just started playing them. I was like, the lines that you improvised, the melodic sensitivity is very similar to when you play on the guitar, right? So I think you improvised that first line. I was like, man, this sounds awesome. Definitely keep that. And then you kind of build up the rest around it. That was really cool. Yeah. Yeah. Did you do any other like keyboard solos as a guest solo? Or was that the only time that you did that?
Yeah. It's the only album that features a keyboard solo.
I don't even know if many people know that yet.
Yeah, I mean, I promoted that fact a little bit because I was proud of it, and it's like technically it was really like on the edge of my abilities, and I didn't want to like fake it and like. And just MIDI program it and then say, here's my solo. I wanted to play it.
Right.
Yeah. So I was kind of proud of that.
Yeah, that is really cool. It's actually one of my favorite moments on the album, actually. That's a really cool one. Yeah. I still remember when we did all the backing vocals with your friends.
Yeah.
Because we were doing the mix, and we're like, man, we need some more voices for the choirs. What are we gonna do? And then you were like, oh man, if you buy some beers and pizza and we invite my friends, they're definitely going to help us out. So we had this night where we did the backing vocals. It was like a big party. I remember that. We started like 5 or 6 in the afternoon and went on until 2 in the morning, and everybody was drinking beers and having fun. And then always like 2 or 3 people were recording parts of the choirs, and then you made these really huge choirs on some songs like Demon Blade, where like 100 voices or something like that.
Yeah, that was fun.
That was super cool. That was really fun. I still remember that night.
Yeah, and people were like, they were talking about that for a long time. Like I mean, it's like some of those people. I mean, they were all musicians. In some
that helped.
In some respect, but none of them, I suppose, are career musicians, and you know like different levels of amateurs. So,
I mean, Ronnie was there from Ted Morose.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Ted Morose, he was there.
Is more of a professional. I mean, they are all, you know, different shades of great.
Right.
But for them, like a lot of them, it was like kind of exciting. Like a German
Yeah.
virtuoso guitar player came and did this album, and they get to
Yeah, that was awesome.
be a part of
It was
it.
really awesome.
So
Yeah,
I think that
that. Yeah, still. And you know what really surprised me was how how quickly and spontaneously this worked. Because in Germany, if I want to make a party, I have to tell everyone 6 or 8 weeks before, because in Germany everyone needs to plan everything. And we were like, hey, I think it was Wednesday, we're doing this thing on Friday, you have time, and everybody came. Actually, everybody was there.
yeah,
So that was really cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's I don't really have that in my circles anymore. I must say.
No?
But I
Okay.
think it's like this is obviously many years before the pandemic, and
Right, 2015, yeah.
yeah, so it's like also 10 years ago. So
Right.
it was like during a time when Friday or Saturday or both nights we saw each other at the pub anyway.
Right.
You know, most of
Right.
these people lived close to the city center where I used to live, so
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
everyone was always kind of around, so it was easier to make it happen than
Right. Right.
now.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's something that I noticed was a big difference to Germany. But that's here in Mexico, it's kind of like that. Also, people are like very social and they like to hang out, and you can really spontaneously, meet with a lot of people if you want to set something up. That's something that I never really had in Germany. But here in Mexico, this is a little bit more normal, you
Yeah,
know, it's a bit of a cultural difference, I guess, sometimes where like in Germany, it's like, oh yeah, I want to make this birthday party, but if people don't know 6 weeks in advance, they're not going to be there, because they need to
yeah,
plan the schedules and everything.
yeah.
Um,
And I
so
think
it's
like
nice to have it a little bit more loose.
when we got those people, like I mean, we tempted them with two pretty good arguments. Hey guys, would you like to music and would you like to alcohol? And they
Exactly.
were like, oh, I love music and I love alcohol. I'm coming.
And pizza and pizza
And pizza,
and
yeah,
pizza we had. Yeah,
three good arguments.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it
yeah. That
was
was
an easy
nice.
sell.
Yeah, that's true. But that was really a great night. I still remember that a lot. Like, there's this really cool photo that we took. That was fun. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Is there any solo by another player which is challenging you at the moment? If you have time to play something from other players, is that something you still do? Learn from others,
I mean, I
transcribing?
try to learn. Yeah, I do that. I transcribe stuff, but I don't really try to completely perform it so I can play the whole thing, simply because of time reasons. I don't have, if I have time to do something, I rather work on writing something, recording something. Then, of
Yeah,
course, I'm teaching, I'm doing guest solo. So when I have time, I still like to transcribe things, but more to get to understand the approach. If I hear something that sounds really cool and I don't really quite understand what is happening, then I might transcribe it.
yeah. So
I still transcribed a
and
lot of
you
Greg
don't
Houser
need to
stuff from the
you don't
Parallax
need to
record.
showcase like I learned a new Dream Theater song and now I'm
Yeah,
gonna.
I mean, I would love to, if I had the time to it, or the skill to it. I would love to do it. But for me, it's more like understanding harmonic concepts, approaches that I then can incorporate into my own music. For example, sometimes if I feel like I get stuck in a rut and my solos start to sound too samey, I always play the same kind of stuff. I want to learn something new. Sometimes I transcribe things. So I mean, I transcribed almost like, I was a huge Greg Howe fan, I still am, but there was two albums, like the album Parallax, solo album from '95, and the album High Definition I did with this Ukraine keyboard player Vitaly Kuprit. There's so many cool lines on that, and I transcribed so much of that over the years. Not that I can always play everything, but a lot of his approaches that really shaped the way I approach things, like how I divide arpeggios on the fretboard, or how also note choices, what he did, and things like that, how to combine techniques and how to create lines. But I never really practiced stuff to the point that I can play the whole thing, because I don't have time for it. It takes me a long time. Very often, I rather practice my own things that I need to play.
Yeah.
They challenge me enough to be able to play things that I want to play in my music. But yeah, if time was unlimited, then I would still do that more, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm seeing we're like 1.5 hours in, so
Oh yeah,
I'm not
seemed
gonna.
very short actually.
Yeah, so I'm not gonna keep it for much longer. But I just thought I had something I'm curious about is how your the condition, your hand condition,
Yeah.
like how did it happen?
Mhm.
And then I wonder, like, did you start tapping more? Like, what kind of things did you
Yeah.
do?
Yeah. So what happened was, and this is really hard for me to say how far back it goes because I can't really know. I know when I got diagnosed, it was in 2011.
Yeah.
I know when I really first noticed something was wrong was in 2009. We were on tour with Obscura for the Cosmogenesis record in America with Cannibal Corpse and the Faceless. And I remember I was playing lines that I could always play, like, and whenever there was like a 1 2 4, like a 300 string kind of thing, I noticed my middle finger isn't coming down anymore. So a couple of shows I played, I was like, the finger didn't hit the notes, so I missed some notes and got a little bit sloppy. But the finger isn't hitting the note right. And then the first impulse that you have is like, oh, maybe I need to practice more because I'm on the road all the time. I don't practice daily, so of course I need to practice more. So on the road I started practicing more, but the more I practiced, the worse it actually got. And then I went to different
Because
doctors, and no one could really.
there was no pain involved.
No.
Yeah.
The weird, no, not really. The weird thing is, a couple of weeks before, I had like a tennis elbow thing that I felt where this kind of felt inflamed. But I didn't really see any connection. I was like, okay, but over practiced wrong. So, and what happened, because I learned after the fact that, I was already subconsciously working against this like muscle that is pulling that I didn't really feel. So subconsciously, other parts were working against it that created a lot of tension here, and that led to this inflammation. So that was a sign, but at that time I didn't make the connection. And we kept touring, and I was always like, okay, I have to practice more. I have to practice more. And I practiced crazy amounts. And then in 2010, we did another tour with the same record. And during the tour, what happened was not only the finger didn't hit anymore, but it was actually curling in. And I was like, man, this finger's doing that. And then you start to wonder, should it do that? And I was watching other players nowadays, not a normal thing to happen. And it took me a long time. I went to many different doctors, and I thought it was like carpal tunnel thing, and they never heard of focal dystonia. So I did a lot of tests with this electroshock-like therapy to see if like there's carpal tunnel. Like, no, physically everything is normal. And I was like, man, this can't be. Why is my technique disappearing? And then we were touring in 2011. We were touring a lot. So we did this US tour with Children of Bodom. And then we did, in between, I recorded the Incorso album with Born of Possession after the Children of Bodom. And then we went to Southeast Asia. And at that time, I had a little bit of an issue with flying. I felt a little bit scared of flying. So I was taking like tranquilizers because I was scared of flying. We had to fly every day in between shows. And what happened, it got way worse. And then we were playing in Jakarta. And I remember we played 3 songs, and after the third song, my hand locked in completely, and I just couldn't control anymore what my fingers were doing. So I kind of faked myself through the set, which was really, really bad, and I felt really down. I was telling the guys, I quit. I can't play guitar anymore. I don't know what's happening. Something is wrong, but I don't know what it is. Doctors couldn't help me, and after this tour, I'm leaving. I'm sorry, And then Linus, the bass player, was like, wait. My father has a big orchestra in Bavaria, and he knows a lot of professional musicians who have disorders. And in the middle of the night, it was in Jakarta, it was like during the day in Germany, he called his father and said, this and that thing is happening to Chris, the finger is curling in and the other is stretching out, you can't control it. And his father was like, oh, this sounds like focal dystonia. And never heard of that before. And after the tour, so I started reading up on that online. I heard a couple of cases and was like, this sounds very similar to what I have. So I went to the doctor that Linus' father recommended, and he then diagnosed me. He's like, yeah, this is focal dystonia. And no one really knows 100% why it happens to some people. So 1 out of 100 professional musicians get it. So it's a 1% kind of chance to develop this. And it always happens to people who practice a lot. So it always comes from practicing too much, and probably with a little bit of faulty technique. Maybe you do something strong. That doesn't mean that your whole technique is fucked, but maybe you do 95% correct, but you have like a 5% thing in there that's just wrong, where maybe you practice with too much tension, or you have some really bad habits. I had really bad habits where I would practice like some of these wide stretched Sean Lane kind of legato runs, but then I would practice them for 2 hours in a row, 2.5 hours in a row. And when I was like, man, yesterday I could get that faster, it doesn't work anymore today, it has to work. And then kind of like
that's what I did when I was young, and I hurt my arms.
Exactly. That's a similar thing. I guess all these injuries come from the same kind of point. Sometimes they turn into something neurologic, like I have, which is dystonia, where in the brain, the movement centers of the fingers overlap. That's why now when this finger puts pressure on the string, the middle finger curls back, and then these fingers stretch out to try to compensate for it. And because what happens when we are very, let's say, practicing very anxiously, you could be nervous even without an audience, but I could nervous in front of myself because I was like, yesterday I played that lick at so and so many BPM, and now I can't anymore, and I don't want to feel frustrated. So kind of this fear of failure in the practice session, and then forcing myself through it. And what happens is you start to activate muscles that you're not aware of, starting with the neck muscles usually, and then being more like this, then all the muscles are like this all the time. Of course, your technique becomes more stiff and less fluent. And when you don't notice that because you don't really train that awareness, over a while this can either turn into an injury like carpal tunnel or something like chronic tendonitis, or can become neurologic, like in my case, right, where it's like in the brain. And there's probably a certain personality profile to all the people who deal with it, because they do a lot of studies because they want to figure out why it happens and how you can actually cure it. And there's no real cure for it. What I did then was of course, I relearned a lot of my techniques. So like you say, I started tapping a lot more. So stuff that in the past where I would do like a 300 per string thing like that. I can do it, but if it over a long time, after a while, my finger starts curling, and in the middle of the run, I can't do it anymore. That's why I did a lot of more stuff now with more like that approach, like 2 fingers of the left hand and 1 finger tapping of the right hand. Or sometimes, for example, where I used to do like diminished arpeggios, like with one hand, like one, so I could do like 8, 11, 14.
Yeah.
And I tap on top. I would now do I basically play 2 fingers, 2 notes with the left hand, and then use 2 fingers of the right hand to kind of extend that. And for arpeggios, I play minor arpeggios, like 1, 1, 3, 4, basically, instead of 1, 2, 4, because the 1, 2 combination doesn't work anymore. It works better now. Like I improved the condition a little bit, but over time it didn't work anymore at all. But doing it live in heat of the moment, I'm more safe if I use 1, 3, 4. So I changed that. And for picking runs, for example, I would do if it's like a 1, 2, 4, I would now do like position with the index finger, and then shifting with the pinky.
We can't hear your guitar.
I know, no, but it's just visually, not
yeah,
just visually. So you see,
just so you know
what I'm doing. Yeah. And so these are some of that was the first thing that I did, was like relearning my technique completely in that way, relearning all the fingerings of everything that I played. And then I started taking therapy. So one therapy I did is called Feldenkrais therapy, which is like where you learn to observe and feel your muscle tension and then being able to address it. So instead of having your body react to it, you can respond to it. Of course, when you play 16th note and 200 BPM, it's very difficult to respond. But when you slow things down, you can train your nervous system on a slower tempo to kind of do that. And the first thing is to understand how emotions like being nervous or feeling discomfort or something can affect the state of your muscle tension. Because when you're nervous, sometimes some people start to breathe more irregularly. In my case, I activate subconsciously more muscles from the neck or the back.
Yeah.
And I can maybe not change feeling nervous or discomfort in a certain situation, because we're human. You can't just change your emotions. You can work on that, but you can't just change it. But what you can learn is to understand how this affects your body, and then to see like, okay, I feel nervous now, but now I feel I have this tension, so I can kind of address it and I can release it. So this is kind of the first thing that I learned. And I practiced that with like super slow practicing, where I play so slow that I stay under the threshold that triggers my dystonic symptoms. And that I play so slow that whatever happens, I can address it before it actually happens. And in a live situation, in Obscura set, for example, I had to play all these songs in full speed, I still had certain lock-in points. There was like points where maybe I just play a chord. Okay, here I can kind of address, if everything is still relaxed and released. And by doing that, I can kind of make the symptoms a little bit less severe. This is the one thing that I did. The other thing I did was like Botox therapy. So 2 times a year I got like Botox injections here into the flexor muscles, because my finger curls from that joint and from here. And these muscles go in here, and with the Botox, the Botox kind of destroys these kind of muscles, but then they grow back. But when they're destroyed, the curling doesn't happen to the same extent. So my finger is not like this, but it's more like that. And I can sometimes use it. But the problem is it weakens your hand a lot, because the Botox like weakens the muscles. And then when you want to bend a string or something, it's harder because you don't have the same strength in the fingers that you normally would have. So I did that 2 times a year, but I stopped this now because I did it for 12 years, and what it shows is that the muscles in the forearm for this therapy, the Botox always leaves a residue, and they're quite deformed compared to the other arm. So the muscles in this arm are, because of Botox therapy, quite underdeveloped to the muscles in my right arm. So even if I'm working out and do stuff like that, this arm will always be bigger than that one because the Botox, and it always leaves a residue in the spine. So it's not really a healthy thing to do. And right now, because I'm not playing any tours and I only record and teach, I don't do Botox. Yeah. Unless I have like tours coming up where I really need it. And the last thing I did is this glove that I'm wearing here. It's a little bit broken now because these gloves, they were out after a couple of weeks. But what happens is, because the texture here is kind of, so everything I play now is live, and almost everything I record, I always play with the glove. Because what the glove does, it tricks the brain, because you don't have the skin on the finger, but you have this different texture here. And then you trick the brain, and when I have the glove, the finger doesn't curl as much as if I'm playing without a glove. So this is also like a thing that helps, but it's kind of like a constant journey. My case is relatively mild, but I've seen people who are all fingers curl all the time, and it can be progressive and spread to the other fingers. And while I'm still dealing with the disorder, I feel I improved it a little bit, so I can do some things again that I had lost completely.
Yeah.
But I still use a lot of compensation techniques. But I haven't cured it completely, but at least it's not spreading, because I know players because I was diagnosed like 14 years ago. And it didn't really get worse. It actually got a little bit better. And a lot of players where it got progressively worse to the point over years that they really couldn't play anymore at all. And whatever could be, for me, the trigger is when the finger comes down. I see players, because I'm coaching people now for Vocal Estonia also in my Skype classes, if people have problems with that. I know people, they just take the instrument in the hand and think about playing something, and then they feel the tension rising up. So there's a trigger. What happens is it's like neurons that are misfiring too early. And by slowing down the nervous system, by super slow practice, you can kind of learn to address that. But then, of course, in technical death metal, 240 BPM songs in a live situation where people are throwing bottles at you or whatever, and everything goes wrong and you didn't sleep, it's very difficult, to address it. But
that's crazy that just thinking about playing triggers it. Yeah.
There was it also exists outside of music. For example, there was a guy from China. He was like the world champion for table tennis. When you play with a table with these small sticks. And what he had perfect technique, and he still had a perfect technique, but as soon as he saw the ball, his hand would do this, and an opening, he would drop the handle, because the ball was the trigger in the brain. It's crazy. It's crazy how that works. So my case is relatively mild. There's way worse cases than that. Victor Wooten now has it in both hands, I think. And for him, it's actually really bad. I met him on NAMM 2 years ago, I think it was, and for him it's like really bad, because like it's like both hands that react just by him seeing the instrument. So this is actually really crazy. But it only happens when you practice it. It doesn't happen to people who just play punk rock and play a couple of power chords 3 times a week. It doesn't happen. It really happens only from severe over practice, probably with a lot of wrong practice habits that we never learned about. Probably a little bit faulty technique to some degree, and then it just starts to at one point just starts to turn into that. And what I noticed, even with students who have like healthy hands, the more you know about the body and these somatics, like how the neck muscles get tense and these muscle groups, when you learn to address that, because that how some people, they practice a lot, but then they hit a plateau where they are really good, but then they can't get any better no matter how much they practice, like from a technical point. And usually it's because of some limiting factors that happen because of that, right? Like too much tension in the neck or in the shoulders that then manifest here, and then there's certain things you just can't play. And by learning about that and being able to teach that, I saw students who have like healthy hands like really reach levels of technicality that they couldn't dream of before, because they didn't think about these things, where they're just isolating the fingers but not on the bigger muscle groups further back and what's happening there. And there could be some inhibiting factors. Once you address them, suddenly you can play things that you couldn't play before, right? Like, for example, doing a stretch, instead of like thinking of it like a stretch, of doing it out of the finger, you can kind of think about like using your arm, using the bigger muscle groups, and think of it like more like reaching. Oh, there's my dog, Ambo. Think of it like reaching instead of stretching. So basically, you have like other muscle groups that are actually moving, and this, and the interesting thing is, so I'm dealing with that on my left hand still, but the more I learned about the things that happen in the body, suddenly my picking technique got much better, because picking, fast alternate picking was always a bit of a weak point for me. I always had some patterns that I could do, but I was quite limited with it.
Mm-hmm.
And without practicing it, but just by learning about like what's actually going on, by doing these like therapies, suddenly my picking technique got much better. Just by understanding these kind of things. So, but that's why even for people with healthy hands, I think it's really useful to learn as much as possible about the body, what actually happens when you play, what muscle groups are activated, because you can also have too much muscle. Like you can, for example, in order to have small movements, sometimes people strain other muscles to keep things from moving, and then you have a lot of tension in the body without being aware of that. And when you start addressing that, sometimes certainly things work that didn't work before, And that's a really and I think what will happen is because the electric guitar and like playing that kind of technical stuff that we play, this style of playing doesn't exist for so long. It exists maybe like 40 years, since the mid 80s, maybe this, or like also like in the 70s maybe, but it's not like the violin or the piano that exists for centuries and where these teaching methods have been really perfected. And I think with the electric guitar, we will see more of that in the future, that the like Trogrady stuff is already going a little bit in that direction. And because the old instructional videos, like the Paul Gilbert stuff, was like, okay, here's the lick slow and here's the lick fast, but there's not a lot of explanations going on, like what actually happens technically, right? What muscle groups you activate and what it would look like. Because I think some people like that, they move very good naturally. They have a talent for this, but they don't not always necessarily know why they can do it. They just do it correctly, intuitively. But they don't know why another guy practiced the same licks, the same amount of hours a day, but he never gets it to the same kind of level and never sounds the same. And it's because some people do things right that other people don't do right, but there's so many micro details to it that the teaching methods haven't really gone into that yet, to that level of depth, I feel.
So I was absolutely over practicing when I was young.
Me too.
Yeah, and I remember when I started getting interested in stretchy stuff and like that was horribly dirty, but those kind of things.
I did also.
And I practiced it for a long time, and I was tensing up, and I started having pain, and I was like, I need to finish this hour of doing this.
Exactly. It's exactly that thing. And the bad thing is these things are still, when we didn't know any better. It was like 14, 15, 16 years. But nowadays, some people still encourage that on the internet. It's kind of like brutal practicing, like forcing yourself. It's kind of like I think for me it was because it was in puberty. It's kind of the thing you want to prove yourself, you got the big balls and you practice through the pain and stuff like that. It's kind of like to confirm it to oneself. Oh, I'm a tough guy. I can do that. But actually, it's a really bad way of practicing, right? Because it's it causes injury, and then you might never be able to do it at all, And this is still sometimes a little bit encouraged, right? This tough guy mentality,
absolutely.
But pain is a warning signal. That's a problem. Pain is a warning signal that something is not right.
Yeah, and for me, I had to pay the price by not playing guitar for 4 years. Over 4 years. This. Yeah, and then when I started again, at first I could start again because I've like the daily pain I had started to fade away slowly. So I was like,
right,
dare I touch the guitar? Oh, I can grab a chord without dying.
I remember when you told me this, right? But for you, it was like a chronic pain thing that happened. That developed from the overpractice. I guess it comes from the same source, right? Because you develop too much tension in the muscles, and I think all these injuries come from the same kind of source of like overpracticing, not listening to the warnings that the body is giving.
Yeah,
the feedback that the body gives you, and then just like powering through it.
But I think
it can work to a certain extent, but then it gets bad.
Yeah. I mean, if you are healthy in your hands, like you can overstrain a bit,
right?
Probably maybe a lot if you can recover.
Right.
But if you don't allow yourself to recover, because it's like you hit the gym and you can go to the gym and lift weights until you are like dying from like I'm in pain, but if you haven't had an injury yet, you can probably, if you just rest enough to recover, like that's something maybe you can do. But once injury starts happen, it's like you have to rethink how you do it. But then when I started playing again, I think since I was so scared of having injuries again, I think I started playing with a lighter touch.
Yeah, I did the same. My touch definitely changed. Yeah.
A bunch of years ago, Ola Strandberg, who is the guy behind the Strandberg guitars, he had designed this little, like a little arm bracelet that you could put around your muscles here. So he did a test at a guitar festival in Sweden where he was exhibiting his guitar. So he had one of his guitars with his patented Endure neck, which is like an ergonomic design, and he had it as the comparison guitar. He had just like a pretty regular Stratocaster. So he tested everyone who was willing, who came to his booth. He had them play both his guitar, a 6-string Strandberg, and the 6-string Strat. Play some things at like the 1st fret and then at the 12th fret, like the same kind of thing, like grab a chord, grab a chord, do a phrase, do a phrase. And then he measured the tension because he wanted to see if he could have some some real data that would support his patented design. And I mean he found it that and I think he found that it was more pronounced up here than down here.
Interesting.
Which is also a part of why I have a custom version of that Endure neck, because we have tweaked the design for me to work better down here. But something that he said, since he got to test this on a lot of guitar players that weekend, and he said that it was funny because when he measured my muscle movements and tension, it was like so much lower than everyone else. It was like almost not,
Yeah. That's why my therapist said
you need to make a difference between how did he call it? Like tension and work. Like the muscle work is just use the minimum amount necessary to get the notes out, because everything else is just too much unnecessary muscle work that's actually active without having to be active. That can even get down to how you're sitting with the guitar, because a lot of times we activate the back muscles kind of like that, to keep in place, but it's actually not necessary because your bone structure, the lumbar core completely supports you with that. So you don't actually need to do that, because once you do that, you already have a lot of tension.
Yeah.
But learning about that but that's the same for me. Like the touch definitely got lighter because of that. It helps a lot, because when you use a lot of like tension or pressure, that first of all can lead to more injury faster, and for me it also aggravates the curling much more, of the milieu. But that's interesting, because I remember when I played your guitar in Sweden back 10 years ago, you had this neck, which kind of I noticed when I played kind of leads the thumb along, because my therapist said a big reason for injury often is also that the thumb is kind of locked in like that all the time, and then your left hand is always bent like this. But when you more fluently, the thumb kind of moves along more, and it's better to have a straight line between the arm and the wrist instead of having it bent like that all the time, because then you have like tension here.
Yeah.
And I remember the guitar neck that you had, the thumb was always kind of leading along in a way that even when I do something here, the wrist never goes like this, right? But the thumb goes nicer. So Ola kind of seems to be very aware of these kind of like things that happen, and designed an instrument like that.
An unsung feature of the Strandberg is like so dark in here, so you can't always see it.
No, it's the shape. Yeah.
You see that shape.
Yes.
That sits very nicely. Oh, there we go. Okay. It sits nicely on your leg. So I'm often wearing it like that on my leg. I'm wearing my pajamas pants. So that's like I can have the guitar in this position, and this is like my main playing position when I'm sitting down. So, and when I'm recording, and since the guitar is kind of lightweight, it's like 2.2 kilos, while still sounding like a big one, like a big guitar.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I can sit like this, and it's kind of, nicely balanced. Like I can record things and be, typing on my keyboard in between and
Right,
editing
right, right.
and go back to the guitar. And it's like having the guitar like this, it keeps my arm.
This is perfect. This is perfect. Then you
Always
always
avoid kind of having like that happen, right? Where it's like, yeah, this is really good. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and if
This is really smart.
I have the guitar down like here, it's gonna be worse.
Right. Right.
And still,
That makes a lot of sense.
the angle is not extreme, so I can still pick really, nicely. So
Yeah. That's really good. I think we'll see a lot more awareness, of these things in the future, because I mean, I don't know if it's because of the internet, because I made it public, but I hear more and more of people who run into injuries and problems like that, and I think it will become a bigger part of teaching the whole like body posture and this kind of thing, to first of all avoid injury, but also to be able to reach your technical potential, and not like be limited by like wrong movements and things like that. I think we'll definitely see more of that in the future. That's really cool.
yeah. So this chat is gonna serve as hopefully a little bit of a warning call and an inspiration
sure
to
so.
some people.
Yeah, sure hope so.
So we should start to round things off. We've hit the 2 hour
Yeah, it's
mark.
been 2 hours.
I
Didn't feel like 2 hours, but yeah.
It goes really quickly, and I want to thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for inviting me.
I did one that was as long as this one with Andy Gillian. We did 2 hours 10 minutes, and it was like we could probably have gone on for another 2 hours.
Yeah, I feel the same. Yeah.
So what are you doing today? Do you have students?
No, today is Sunday. I'm not actually doing anything. Just spend some time with my wife and my dog. Maybe watch a movie, go something to eat, and tomorrow back to the grind as usual. Teaching and recording, finishing my records, writing more lyrics. Still got to finish some guest solos. Got to do some promo stuff. Got to film some playthrough stuff for the Metamorphosis record. So all that kind of stuff is happening this week.
Yeah. All right. You have to plug your new record.
Oh yeah. Right. So we got this album out. Who hasn't heard it yet? Retromorphosis. This is basically the last Spawn of Possession lineup. The music is not too far away from Spawn of Possession, because Jonas is the main composer and you can always hear his style and approach. But the approach wasn't anymore to go as far over the top as possible. It was more to be like moody, atmospheric, kind of old school death metal, but still it's more technical than most old school death metal. But and so this album came out on Friday, and I have to say, I really like the compositions that Jonas did, because I'm a big fan of his composing style, and I'm really happy with my solos on that record. So I think
I listened a little bit to it today.
Oh yeah, it is.
And there was a really sexy solo with a lot of long fluent lines over like a super fast double kick thing, like the second
really
song or something.
Nice. Yeah. Maybe if you have time to listen to the whole album, I would like to hear your opinion. What you think of it? Because I feel like in terms of my solos, this is probably my favorite work so far that I've done. It's kind of, I like my work on the Incursor album by Spawn of Possession, but I don't like my tone on that, because I used the Podline 6 that cut off all the high mids and stuff. And I like my ideas on record, but the sound is so muddy that sometimes you can't really hear what I'm doing. And on the new one, I'm way happier with that. And it's like one of the few times a record comes out and I'm 100% satisfied with how it is, because usually I have
that's a good feeling.
This and this. Yeah, and that's a good feeling. I'm really happy about that. So yeah, that came out on Friday. So anyone who hasn't listened to that yet, check it out. It's called Retromorphosis. It's the name of the band, and Psalmus Mortis is the name of the album.
Nice.
Cool.
All right. So everyone who watched this when we did it live, maybe people are going back to it later and seeing this in the future. Hello, future people. I hope I'm still alive and doing well. Same for Christian. Yep. But thanks for watching this, and thank you, Christian. And Chris, stay online and
Okay.
After I close down the stream, so we can hug and kiss before we
Yeah,
leave.
exactly.
So, but for
Exactly.
everyone else, this is our final hugs and kisses for today.
Yeah. Bye bye.
I'll see you in the next one. Cheers, everyone.